And I think there's a part of me that thought, can you be burned out if you love your job? Can you be burned out if you're getting to do the thing that you've dreamed about for the last 20 plus years? Can you be burned out if you make really good money and it's not that bad? We have this way of humans as of minimizing our own suffering and saying like, well, I did get pneumonia and I did have autoimmune hyperthyroidism and I couldn't, talk because I was so short of breath because my heart rate was double normal. But, I can walk and I can see and I'm educated and I, have a loving partner. We get into all these things where we say like, it could be worse. And I do think I was doing that. I think I was mitigating how much of an impact burnout was having on my life.
Welcome to the PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. I've never done this before, but I'm going to share something intimate, literally about my intimates on the podcast. After trying Vibrant Body Company's certified clean first layer bras and underwear, I threw everything else away. Life is too short to wear bras that don't fit. So schedule your virtual fit consultation with their master bra designer, Heidi. You get to Zoom, do live measurements, and find the exact right fit for you before ordering. Use the link in the show notes or the discount code Tracy15 for 15% off your Vibrant Body Company order. Make sure you try the thong and the semi-demi everywhere bra. You'll thank me later.
Hey, and welcome back to another episode of The PA is In. Today, I'm going to share my story of personal and professional burnout. I have shared a little bit about my career here in the past, but as a little refresher, or in case you are new here, I knew I wanted to be PA when I was 16 years old. I job shadowed a PA in the ER and one in my local family practice office. And between those two people, their names were Greg and Megan. I had some great encounters. I got to help, and by help, I mean throw one suture onto the sterile field, fixing a toe laceration in the ER. And I also got to see the family practice aspect of medicine and how well they got to know their patients and the fact that they got to know their patients over time and the fact that this PA really met people where they were when they were vulnerable or not feeling their best or getting some bad news or having to make lifestyle modifications if they wanted to live a long and healthy life. So I knew I wanted to be a PA when I was 16 years old. I applied, I went to a 3+2 program. I got out, I got a position in general surgery at a small community hospital. Then I moved to a big university health network, also in general surgery. And then ultimately I moved into the position where I was working when I burned out, which was robotic urology at a large university health network. I describe my burnout in that position like the frog in the boiling water. So I don't know if you've ever heard this story, but if you put a frog in lukewarm water and you warm it up slowly over time, the frog doesn't quite realize what's going on. So they don't jump out because it's not a sudden change. It's not suddenly hot where they get surprised and jump out. If you put a frog in a really hot boiling pot of water, they will use their little froggy legs with their massive jumping power and they will jump out because, wow, that's hot. But the thing about my position was at first, it was a manageable amount of work. At first, the degree of stress was something that I could cope with. At first, the hours were reasonable, and what was being asked of me was something that I felt like I could do. And then our health network expanded and our service got busier. And every time the CEO bought a hospital, they sent an email that said, "Don't worry, we can afford it." But I wasn't really worried about that. What I was worried about was who was going to round at that hospital. And more specifically, I was worried that it was going to fall to me to round at that hospital, to cover those patients, to take the pager, to take more call, to have more people on my census than I had, and really more than I could manage as one single person. So looking back, I think maybe someday I'll do an episode what I would tell myself if I could go back and give advice to my burning out self, to my smoldering self, to the self who was in pre burnout, who was headed towards this really deep, dark, very burned out place. I think I did see this coming. So I think I did realize, wow, I'm doing more than ever. This is a lot. I'm staying later, more often than not. I'm not getting out on time. I also loved the content of what I was doing. So if you need someone to clamp a renal artery and do a complicated partial nephrectomy, I am your girl. I thrived in the OR. I absolutely adored the surgeries that we were doing. I also really liked my team. So I don't want this to come off as like vilifying like my surgeons or my team or even the network. I think it was the perfect storm for me personally with my like baseline tendencies to get burned out. I think one thing that I did wrong along the way was, and burnout is not your fault, but this is something that I could have adapted as I went. I didn't build boundaries. So I didn't just leave with patients unseen and things undone. I stayed. I stayed until everything was tidied up and every patient was seen and the people in the ER were evaluated. I do think I tried to build some boundaries, but I wasn't super effective with my boundary building. And I wasn't great at communicating those boundaries. So sometimes I would say over the weekend, okay, this week, I'm not going to work late. This week, I'm not going to get stuck in the OR. This week, I'm going to get home on time. This week, I'm going to get there for dinner. But I didn't actually set myself up for success. So I didn't actually tell anyone that I was going to be leaving on time, which would have been a big change. I didn't tell the call person I was no longer going to pick up the phone after 5 p.m. So these boundaries really only existed in my mind. They were theoretical boundaries. They were boundaries that would have been great if I had made them, enforced them, and communicated them to other people. But because I hadn't done any of those things, I got more and more burned out because I didn't really have any boundaries. I was checking my email at home. I was checking on sick patients in the unit on my phone at my kids' games. I was thinking about work when I was at home. And then when I was at work, I was worrying about home because I really hadn't been present when I was home, which, as you can see, is like a downward cycle of like thinking about work at home, thinking about home at work, thinking about work at home, thinking about home at work, and not really having the bandwidth to really be present in either one of those places. So I do think I was like, is it getting hot in here? Like, is it just me? Are there other people that are realizing this amount of work that we're doing seems unreasonable? Also, a lot of my team members were outpatient. I was inpatient based. Some of the surgeons saw what I was doing, but they also rotated call and I wouldn't be with them all the time. So it was really me covering half the network, one of my nurse practitioner colleagues covering the other half of the network. So that job when I started was when I was rounding 7:30 to 4:30, maybe 8 to 4:30. And I was in the OR 7 to 5 because we didn't have as many add-ons when I first started. And then over time, it became more and more. My census got heavier and heavier, and I started to do more and more and more. But I didn't have more help. And I really was pretty much operating at my maximum efficiency. Like, I like to get stuff done. If you ask me to do something, I'm absolutely going to get it done. And I do think that was part of the problem. So patients weren't mad, nothing bad happened, like patients were safe, like everything was bumping along. And one time I was talking to the surgeon and I said, "Gosh, can you believe that we're doing this? Can you believe that we don't have the ability to sleep? Can you believe that we're going post call? Can you believe that we're doing 36 hours straight? Can you?" And he said something I will never forget. "Tracy, sometimes it has to break before they're willing to invest in fixing it." And I was like, whoa, okay. So this isn't broken to them. So like I am breaking, but this isn't broken because patients are still getting seen, because we're still meeting our numbers. And I did ask for help. I asked to go part-time. I asked for some evening relief from the call person. I asked for more support from the surgeons. And there were some yeses, but by and large, nothing really changed. And nothing really changed fast enough for me to think things are about to get better. Actually, when I quit, when I resigned after I had burned out, someone said, but they're about to do all these things that are going to make it so much better. And I saw that person who said that thing like 2 years later, and I said, how is it? And they said, it's the same, which was very validating to me, because when you leave and someone says, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're leaving, or it's about to get better, or someone said to me, I can't believe you're leaving us here. And I like sort of debated taking on that person's guilt and like considering that accusation and saying, is it me? Like, am I leaving you here? And what I had to realize and what I had to embrace was that everyone who worked there is an adult, and they get to make their own choices. So you may love your team and your colleagues and other advanced practice providers or your physicians, or have some sense of loyalty to your patients or your organization, but ultimately you have to do what's best for you. So here's what happened to me and how I ended up doing what was best for me in that season. So I was working more and more and more. And so I was averaging 60 hours a week, and I don't work weekends. So it was 5 12-hour days ish. Even on weeks when I wasn't on call, that was the number of hours that I was working. And because I think this is important to note, I was salaried. So I was really getting paid for quote unquote 40 hours, and I was working 60, which meant I was accidentally volunteering for 20 hours a week, and I did not want to be. So I was working, I was going to work early, I was staying late. We were covering more hospitals than ever. And I reached this breaking point. So I had up until that point been a healthy 30-year-old provider whose mental and physical health had never affected my ability to do my job. And that statement in and of itself is a position of privilege to be able-bodied and to never have had these physical limitations that made it so I couldn't do my job. So over the course of the year before I really quit and was really in the depths of burnout, I was diagnosed with pneumonia. I was in the ER multiple times with tachycardia. I was diagnosed with subacute post-viral thyroiditis, which actually turned out to be antibody negative Graves' disease, so an autoimmune hyperthyroidism. And I had this profound tachycardia, which took several years to really find the root cause of and get under control. And all of those things were my body screaming at me, stop, please stop. We can't keep going like this. But it didn't start as a scream, it started as a whisper. And it started as my body saying, like, I have a cold, I can't recover, I'm not getting sleep, I don't think I can keep going like this. And mentally, it was me saying, something has got to give. I can't keep going like this. This is crazy. The demands are insane. And just generally feeling like what I was doing was not sustainable. I was thinking, I can't go on like this. I can't keep not seeing my kids. I can't keep not being home for bedtime. But I kept going anyway. And I ignored those whispers. And then my body said, hey, stop. Here's pneumonia. Maybe this will slow you down. Here's tachycardia that makes it so you can't breathe even when you're standing still, where your resting heart rate's 150 to 180 and you're sitting. That'll give you anxiety even if you have no history of anxiety. So I had all of these physical things that were happening to me. From a relationship standpoint, when I was burned out, I wasn't the wife or the mom or the friend or the daughter or the person that I want to be in this world. I was all consumed with stress and talking about work and being resentful of work and being the victim in my own life. And I knew something had to change, but I also didn't have this sort of like catalyst to make it change. And I think there's a part of me that thought, can you be burned out if you love your job? Can you be burned out if you're getting to do the thing that you've dreamed about for the last 20 plus years? Can you be burned out if you make really good money and it's not that bad? We have this way of humans as of minimizing our own suffering and saying like, well, I did get pneumonia and I did have autoimmune hyperthyroidism and I couldn't, talk because I was so short of breath because my heart rate was double normal. But, I can walk and I can see and I'm educated and I, have a loving partner. We get into all these things where we say like, it could be worse. And I do think I was doing that. I think I was mitigating how much of an impact burnout was having on my life.
One of my very favorite things about being a podcaster is crossing paths with other incredible podcasters. If you love this show, especially when I share about my experience with healthcare burnout and recovery, you're going to want to check out the podcast Burnout: What I've Learned So Far, hosted by my friend Meg Letty. Meg is a former CT surgery PA turned advocate for healthcare provider wellness. Turn in to hear how she recovered from burnout and integrated well-being into her life to create a life of dreams, not nightmares. Add Burnout: What I Have Learned So Far with Meg Letty to your podcast queue to start your journey to wellness and healing today.
So one day I worked 12 hours in the OR. I was on call overnight. I'd gotten maybe 2, possibly 3 hours of sleep, which was broken by calls and a trip to the ER, where I reduced paraphimosis, got a guy out of AFib, stabilized his blood pressure. How's that for a foreskin manipulation? I can't believe I just said that on the podcast. And then I came home. I maybe slept for an hour and then I got more pages and I was up. It was 5, 6 in the morning. And we have 4 sons and 1 daughter. And our youngest daughter, someone must have gotten her out of her crib because she's still sleeping in a crib at this point. She comes toddling around the corner. And I'm on the phone. I've got my laptop balanced on my knee. She has these little purple footy pajamas that I think have owls on them, and her hair is a mess and she's carrying her little stuffed animal and she's wiping the sleep out of her eyes. And she says, "Mama up." And I'm like, oh gosh, I know how warm and snuggly she is. Like, oh, she's not mad yet. She's not tantruming yet. I just want to scoop her up. I just want to hug her. I want to be there for my kid at 5:30 in the morning at a time when I should be able to be available to her. And I have a guy with Fournier's who needs to get in a helicopter to get to the university hospital, and another page waiting for me in the ER of some guy with a stone, and rule out testicular torsion, like in my mind, of another, someone remote that I might need to transfer. And so I'm working, right? I haven't slept in 24 hours, really significantly slept. And my daughter wants me to pick her up. And so I say, honey, I can't. No, I can't pick you up. And she looks me straight in the eye. And because she's 2 at the time and has 4 older brothers and doesn't like it when people tell her no, she says, "Mama, you're stupid." And my heart broke. And it was the turning point that made me realize that I was being stupid. That I was so burned out that I was clinging to the idea of this job that seemed like a good idea at the time, and that I had to accept was not a good fit for me during this season of life, was not something that I could salvage. And I had tried so hard before that point to salvage it. I had raised my hand in meetings and said, "What about this?" Or "Could we get this help?" Or "How about this?" Or "Let's try this." I had asked to go part-time and they said no. I did feel like I had done everything in my power to potentially salvage that position for me during that season. I think there was a really big part of me that felt like a failure because I looked around and I saw everyone else thriving in these positions and I was suffering. I was not enjoying myself. I was not able to function. I was not able to show up in the way that I wanted to in the world. And ultimately, that was not okay with me. So my daughter called me stupid and I had a major meltdown, like crying, had to hang up the phone with the transfer center, couldn't breathe. Like this was the breaking point. Um, one of my boys actually said to Dan, I think mom might need a timeout. No one has ever needed a timeout as much as I needed a timeout in that moment. But I couldn't take a timeout because I had to go to work. So I'm sobbing and Dan's like, what's wrong? And trying to piece together like why Ray is crying, why I am crying. And he says, honey, and we talked about this. He said, honey, I think you need to resign today. And I said, resign today? I don't have time to resign today. Well, here's your sign, right? Here's your sign that that is not okay, that you need time to eat and drink and pee and have a conversation with your boss or quit your job or say this isn't sustainable and it isn't working for me. Now, there is one thing that I'm a little hesitant to share, but I do want to sort of bring out into the light and talk about. So, when I was burning out, I did ask to go part time and they said no. And then I was in the depths of this sickness. And I met with my supervisor who had previously been wonderful with me. And I said, I can't physically keep going on like this. I can't work 60 hours. I can't do 36-hour stretches without sleep. I can't keep going like this. And she invited me to apply for disability accommodations if I couldn't do my job. If I wasn't able to meet the job requirements, is I think, quote unquote, what she said. And I wasn't willing to do that. Number one, because I didn't feel like I had a disability. I felt like I didn't want one, right? So I had an autoimmune condition. I wanted to slow down a little. I didn't think that the rate at which I was going was sustainable for me, but I didn't I wasn't disabled. I was unwilling. So I said, I don't think I'm unable to do this. I mean, I physically think I'm unwilling to keep going at this rate, at this pace, doing this much work. And it was this whole thing, and HR was there, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say I'm no longer willing to volunteer 20 hours a week for free, right? Like you could pay me for that, or we could hire another person, or could we get coverage in this way? And that was really hard for me because I had always thought of myself as this young, healthy, vibrant, otherwise healthy 30-year-old who was dealing with just a couple things when really I was quite sick and very burned out. So I quit that job. And I slept through the night for the first time in probably 6 months, the night after I gave my notice. So I didn't know if I'd be working 30, 60, 90 days. We were still working out the details of how long I would stay in that position. Um, but I did know the end was coming. And my body knew that I needed that to happen. So sometimes I think about like looking back, like if I had looked at myself from the outside in and tried to diagnose myself with burnout, like did I meet the clinical criteria? Did I meet that triad of burnout that we know to be this one, decreased sense of personal accomplishment, two, this sense of depersonalization, like you're not that connected to your patients, like you don't feel like you're personally like fulfilled by your job, and three, emotional exhaustion. So I want to go through each of these one at a time and share kind of what my experience was with each one of these elements of burnout. So number one, a decreased sense of personal accomplishment. Absolutely yes. During this season when I was burned out, I felt like I was on this professional treadmill. I'd wake up, go to work, show up, see patients, write notes, do surgery, rinse and repeat again the next day. I didn't feel like I was making a real difference in patients' lives. And I sort of had this feeling or this thought that whatever I did was just like a drop in the bucket. I felt so disenfranchised, like marginalized, upset with the healthcare system and insurance companies and what was being asked of me and the way that we were making decisions, that I didn't really feel this sense of personal accomplishment that I have felt other times in my career as a PA. It feels important to say, like, I'm sure I probably was making a difference in my patients' lives. And I do think I was having an impact, and I do think I was doing a good job keeping them safe and having these positive interactions. But I was personally too burned out to see that positivity of my interactions with them and like sense that personal sense of accomplishment from it. One of the hallmarks of burnout is that you don't benefit from positive emotions like other non burned out individuals do. So, when you're burned out, you can still have these moments of joy or feel gratitude or hope or happiness. But if you're burned out, it's not restorative to you in the way that it would be if you weren't burned out. So I do think my life was dotted with these moments of restoration and positivity when I was deeply burned out, but I was too burned out to reap the benefits of them. So I absolutely positively do think that yes, I was experiencing this decreased sense of personal accomplishment at work. And then there's number 2, this depersonalization. At the time when I burned out, I felt less connected to my patients than I ever had before. I became a PA because I wanted to take care of patients. And when I was burned out, I felt like I was taking care of patients just because it was my job, not because I really cared about them or felt this sense of connection to them. I personally think that was because during that time, my bandwidth was at capacity or over capacity. I didn't have the capacity to be vulnerable and connected and feel that personal connection with my patients. I was barely keeping my head above water when I was so burned out. I was so consumed with my own survival that I didn't have a whole lot of bandwidth to really be compassionate and as caring as I think I've been at other points of my career. And then there's number 3, emotional exhaustion, which is when I'm tired, when I have insomnia, which I only really have had when I was burned out. um, my mom can always tell when I'm tired because I'll just cry on the phone over like nothing. Um, that deep, profound emotional exhaustion was absolutely present when I burned out. I actually can remember one time, super stressful day. I'm rounding at hospital 2 of 3 for the day. I get to this patient who's an add on stone who was admitted from the ER, made it up to the floor, and he's in his room and his wife is there. And I walk in and I introduce myself. I say, "Hey, I'm Tracy. I'm the PA. I work with Dr. So and so. I'm going to be helping getting you ready for surgery. Can you tell me what happened when your pain first started?" Like doing the whole history and physical. And they had had a bad experience with our answering service where they had called our answering service. He was in pain. There was some miscommunication. They didn't love the way it went down. And here I am, haven't slept, like exhausted, second hospital of 3. And they're just going up one side of me and down the other about how our hospital system is a wreck and how they can't treat patients like this and they need to get a person on the phone, and just like really, really tough, this tough patient encounter. And I broke down crying and I told them, I know that our call center could use some improvement. I know that there are things that we could be doing better, but right now, what I need to do is get you safely to the OR. So I will speak to my surgeon. I will speak to the team. I will let them know about your experience. If you want, I can get you in touch with a manager at our practice. But for now, what I need is to take care of you. And I was sobbing. I was crying. I was like, listen, no system is perfect and ours is filled with humans. Like, we're working on it. And they were looking at me like, whoa, what? And I really wasn't that upset about the call center or like this particular patient or this particular encounter, but I was so emotionally exhausted that at the drop of a hat, I could lose my ability to self regulate my emotions. It was like my nervous system was just on screech and I couldn't reel it back in. I couldn't emotionally regulate myself because I was too burned out. I would love to tell you like my mission in life is to rid the world of burnout, but I think that that is nearly impossible. I would love to change the culture of medicine. I would love to make a burnout something that we're not scared to talk about, something that people are more open about, something that employers and colleagues are more supportive of and sort of get, where if you say I'm burned out, they like get it. But I also get that we can only change our modifiable risk factors, right? So we can't change like our natural, overachieving, hard driving tendencies. But what we can do is touch base with our bodies and create a system where we listen in to what our bodies are doing. We spend all day thinking about what other people's liver function, renal function, scans, CT results, pain level, emotional situation, whatever it is that you do for medicine. You spend all day asking other people, like, how are you feeling? What's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? How are you doing? But we don't often take that opportunity to check in with ourselves and see and hear how we are doing. If I could go back, I would listen to my body sooner. I would listen to those whispers before they came shouts, before they became an inability for me to physically, emotionally do my job. I think if I were to burn out again, I would see the warning signs sooner rather than later. But I also want you to have all the tools possible so that you can recover from or avoid burnout. So I made this assessment. It's a burnout quiz to see what your burnout risk level. Are you at low, moderate, or extremely high risk for burnout? So I'll link it in the show notes or at tracybingaman.com/burnout-quiz. You can find a quiz that's going to ask you a couple of questions about how you feel about work and patients and connecting to them, and sort of flesh out what your risk for burnout is. My life will be forever changed because I burned out. My relationships will be forever changed because I burned out. And I am grateful for what I've learned about myself, what I've learned about my body, for the things that have sort of come and gone as a result of this experience with this encounter with burnout and recovering from burnout. I think that burnout has helped me to appreciate my health in a different way and to see my time, energy, and money as things that I can spend to help people who I love the most, and also to help me to figure out what needs to be outsourced, to figure out what needs to be me, and to really embrace living a life in accordance with my own values. I like to say I'm not healed from burnout, but I'm healing from burnout. And I do think it's a journey to figure out what you need, what habits and systems and processes you need in place so that you can thrive and work in healthcare. I hope that this episode met you where you are. And if you are feeling burned out, I would love to connect and hear how you're doing. You can send me an email, themoneypa@gmail.com. I would love to hear your story and to support you during this time. If you think that you would like to lean in and do some career coaching, the links for that are in the show notes. I will see you next time on The PA is In.
Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.